I'm happy to see everybody here, and welcome to our first virtual talk. We are very happy to have Kyle Thompson Westra, and author of The New Invisible Hand. I'm pitching the book in front of me. And I will pass it now to Aaron Pagel, our program facilitator, and he will do a bit of a longer introduction of Kyle and tell us about the parameters of the talk. Aaron?
Thanks, Rafael, and thank you everybody for joining. So just as a quick heads up, please keep your microphones on mute. So I'm going to give you a bit of a kind of a engagement on like how we're going to work this. We have over 100 people signed up for this webinar, which is super exciting, and I'm really glad everyone's coming to join us this evening. So because of that though, and this is essentially a Zoom meeting with a lot of people, we're just going to be a little bit mindful about how we're engaging on the technology. I'm going to just talk about that briefly. First off, this is going to be a presentation that's going to be followed by a Q&A session. So it's going to go about an hour, and then Kyle will take like a more formal Q&A component to that. That said, you are welcome to ask questions during the presentation, or if you have questions, we want to make sure that you have the opportunity to kind of address it in real time. So the way we're going to do that, if you open up your participants pad, your participation or your participants tab, there's a function called raise your hand. I want everyone to just take a moment to look for that. If you have a question, hitting raise your hand will show up a little blue icon next to your name in the participants list. Kyle's going to go through and at certain points try to offer moments to ask questions. Yep, exactly, Alan, you found it. So at that moment, feel free to raise your hand in that regard. And we'll call on you, and then together we'll make sure that you're unmuted. Kyle and I both have the power to unmute you. Obviously, you're going to unmute yourself. We'll give you a moment, but if it feels like it didn't happen, we'll help. But together as a team, we'll make this happen. So if you have questions during the presentation, please use that method. If you have questions that you'd like to ask, but are kind of just like general questions, feel free to chat us. So right now, I've disabled the chat function so that it's not going to go to everyone. Anything you chat will go directly to the hosts. So feel free to chat a question in that way too. If it's not something you want to interrupt about, but you want to make sure that you've at least mentioned the question or it's out there for us to address. Additionally, I want to let everybody know that this webinar is being recorded right now. So we're recording the speaker screen and the presentation or the slides you see in front of you. So just want to give you a heads up that that is happening. If you record or ask a question with your voice, you're going to be recorded, and that's going to be presented online and like on YouTube and LinkedIn and whatnot. So if that's something you don't want, then I would then just be mindful of that, but just give you a heads up. But also, because we're recording it, you'll have the opportunity to rewatch this later and share with your friends, because this is going to be a very awesome talk. I'm very excited to have Kyle with us today. And so with that kind of operational admin stuff, I'd like to take a moment now to give a bit more of a fuller introduction to Kyle. So this program, what we talk about in the economics department at DePaul and talking about strategy, there's a lot of, it's just a wealth of information out there for us to engage in this kind of very dynamic world we live in right now, and which is also changing a lot these days. So Kyle and I, we actually worked a Groupon together a long time ago. We didn't interface directly, but we did have some kind of crossover every now and then. And so at the end of Groupon, Kyle actually joined the full-time program at DePaul and earned his MBA, and has since gone on to become a pricing consultant at Wigloff Pricing. And he also wrote, as Rafael mentioned, The New Invisible Hand, which talks a lot about pricing associated with, or how pricing decisions are made given that technology has changed and we're dealing with a lot more transparency. Now, that's just like the hint. Kyle obviously is the expert in this manner, and he's going to talk a bit about that in kind of throughout this his presentation. But now I'd like to say welcome, Kyle, and pass it off to you.
Great, thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Rafael, and thank you everyone for joining. It's too bad that we're not able to do this in person. We were hoping to do this in Chicago last month, but the benefit of this, like Aaron said, not only can we watch it again, but we can include people from all over the country and hopefully all over the world. So it's really great to be here. I am talking to you from sunny Colorado. Apologies to people who are living in rainier and colder places. If it's any consolation, we'll probably get a foot of snow tomorrow, and then it will pop back up to the 80s. It's just how it works in the mountains. But like Aaron said, I'm here to talk a bit about the concepts that I explored in my book, a little bit about how I got into pricing strategy in the first place, and a bit about what that career has looked like for me. The topic of the presentation is pricing strategies for executives and entrepreneurs. And what I really want to do is introduce the framework that I explore in the book, which is a method of exploring different trends that are happening in technology and business, and using that knowledge of those trends to understand where, as entrepreneurs and executives and students of business, we might be able to make changes that we want to see. So let's see if the presentation works. All right. So first of all, a little bit more about my background. I was a liberal arts guy. I went to Tufts University. I studied political science and economics. I thought I wanted to be a foreign policy guy going forward. My first job was at a foreign policy think tank in DC called CSIS. This is me in younger days talking to Richard Armitage, who was Deputy Secretary of State under the Bush administration. My role there was really to study different global trends. I worked in a leadership academy there too, where we ran programs for different business executives, visiting diplomats, military leaders. It was a super interesting place, filled with super smart people. The more I got into it, I realized that I wanted something with a little more immediate feedback. And the economic side of my education was calling to me more. So when life circumstances brought me to Chicago, I tacked a little bit more in the business direction. And like Aaron mentioned, started at Groupon, where he and I would interact via Salesforce.com. I joined Groupon just about a week before it went public. By then, it was already a 2,000 person organization, I think. Still run like a small startup, as people may have read in the news. But it was a super fascinating time for me to really sink my teeth into the technology world, digital business world. I was there for just about 2 years doing different marketing analysis, sales support for different sales teams, before I decided to leave and go back to school for a full-time MBA program at DePaul University, a cohort program there, which was a really great way to not only to get a business education surrounded by people who I spent a lot of time with, but it was a really great program for me too, not coming from a traditional business background, making sure, frankly, that I got my intro to accounting, that I got my intro to all these other fields that I really didn't know much about, and I think are an important part of a graduate business education. After my first year there, I started at cars.com while finishing up school in the evenings. So I had a few different roles there, as strategy and business development intern, which morphed into more of a business operations, project management, IT support type role, bridging the gap between the IT sales teams, the IT teams and the sales teams, and getting a taste of what pricing would be like in an organization like that too, in kind of a roundabout manner. The way that I got into Wigloff pricing was actually our CEO, Tim Smith, is a professor, adjunct professor at DePaul. He teaches pricing strategy, which on the recommendation of another professor was the last class that I took. That professor knew that I was interested in decision-making and strategy and marketing analysis. And it was like, you should really check out this course. It's a pretty interesting field. I thought I knew something about pricing from my economics days. It turns out that pricing in reality is extremely different from what you might learn in Economics 101, or frankly, even in Business 101. I mean, there you learn that pricing is one of the 4 Ps, right? You have product, price, place, and promotion under marketing. So price here almost feels like an afterthought. Like, sure, you design your product, you need to put it out there, and you figure out a price somehow. That's, the details are kind of in the weeds. But taking the course I got my first taste of, and then these past 5 years with the organization, I've really learned how price is such an interstitial role at an organization, and a really interstitial field too. There are aspects of so many different areas that are informed by price and in turn inform price. It's frankly a really great place for someone with a general background like me who is interested in business strategy, psychology, organizational design, sales, marketing, finance, IT. All these areas really need to come together in order to make really good pricing strategy decisions as an organization. So I was lucky enough to join Wigloff Pricing after finishing my MBA. We are a boutique consulting firm based in Chicago, but work all over the world. We focus mostly on 3 different industries: life science, everything from agrochemicals to medical devices, manufacturing, industrial, and then quite a lot of software and technology companies as well. Like I said, I've been here for 5 years. I have actually only worked remotely, first from DC and now from Colorado. And needless to say, in the era of COVID-19, we're even more remote these days than usual. It's been a while since I've sat on a plane. I'm getting a little itchy. I'm usually doing that at least a couple times a month, but we'll get back to normalcy when we can. So I've been working in pricing strategy for 5 years. We're consultants, so we work on a lot of different types of projects, a lot of different types of organizations. And after even just a few years, I'm starting to see some commonalities in questions that we're getting, concerns that we're getting from different executives across the spectrum of different industries. We're relating a lot around how technology and digital disruption is affecting business strategy and pricing strategy in particular. One of the really nice things about Wigloff Pricing for me is that it's important for us to always be learning. Not only is that critical as a consultant, but in order to deliver the best for our projects and to see the commonalities between different organizations, between different industries, we kind of need to be thought leaders. We need to be thinking about this stuff. So some of the questions that I had banging around my head became different avenues that I wanted to pursue in a book that Raphael and Aaron were kind to hold up, hard copy versions of. The New Invisible Hand, 5 Revolutions in the Digital Economy. I published it last summer, so we're coming up on a year. It became an Amazon bestseller, which was really great to see how the themes were resonating with different executives. And something that could come up in questions I would love to talk about is just the process of writing a book is a really great tool for honing how you think. If you can't communicate an idea, you really don't understand it. So being forced to write really deeply about different topics is a great way to make sure that you actually understand what you're talking about. You actually have an informed opinion. And also writing a book is a great way to knock on different people's doors. There are a lot of people who want to talk about their experiences, who are eager to talk about their experiences, especially if you say, I'm trying to understand these subjects more. I'm writing a book. Could I have 30 minutes of your time? You'd be really surprised who will answer that call. So the way that the book in this presentation is structured is around these 5 kind of fundamental revolutions, as I call them, themes that I saw emerging, kind of irregardless of the technologies that are used. I didn't want this to be a book about the next hottest technology. 2 years ago, everyone was talking about blockchain. That's kind of quieted down. The technology du jour kind of comes and goes. No one can really predict which individual technology is going to take off, but the general themes, kind of going back to my first job out of college, global trends, these general themes are ones that are irrespective of technologies, and we can really identify which directions they're going and decide how we want to meet those challenges and take advantage of those challenges. So the 5 that we have are reintermediation, monetization, transparency, channel, and data. We're going to go through those one by one. So first of all, reintermediation. Basically, a intermediary is a fancy word for a middleman. Everyone's least favorite organization, right? Middlemen feel like leeches to a lot of people. They feel like they don't add any value. They just drive up costs. They make things more complicated. if ever there was a Simpsons mob going after someone, it would be the middleman. And one of the things that a lot of writers and talking heads predicted was that the internet was going to kill the middleman. In fact, what we've seen is if anything, the reverse. The internet has increased the importance of middlemen in many, many different ways. One of the interesting stories that I heard about that in researching for this book was about this dashing young man named Bill Gates, and a situation that occurred in Chicago in the mid-90s where he attended a newspaper convention. You might be wondering, what is Bill Gates doing at a newspaper convention? But as the story was told to me by Mitch Galoob, who was the founder and CEO of Cars.com, Bill Gates was there to basically say, look, technology is coming for the newspapers. The newspaper classifieds, so where they put all of their advertisements, that was the big cash cow for newspapers. Bill Gates was there to basically say, we're going to put this stuff online. We're going to take all of your money. And if you don't like it, there's nothing you can do about it. So in the storytelling, this launched something of a shouting match, as you can probably imagine. This upstart kid might be great at computers, but doesn't know a thing about newspapers, comes into your annual meeting and says that he's going to eat your lunch. A lot of people just thought he was absurd, but a group of newspaper people actually saw the writing on the wall and said, we are going to be re-intermediated. There's going to be a different type of organization that comes into this industry and is this middleman between businesses that have advertisements and the consumers that need to read them. And that group of companies actually in Chicago became known as Classified Ventures, and they became the housing company for groups like Career Builder, Apartments.com, Cars.com. These were all ways of taking what were previously only done in newspapers, or primarily done in newspapers, and bringing them online. Basically meeting Bill Gates' challenge and becoming quite profitable companies, survived the dot-com bust, and are still humming along very nicely. The need for those advertisements, for those classifieds, didn't change, but the method by which consumers wanted to access them changed completely. And I really like this example of re-intermediation because it's something that the entrenched players in the industry really didn't see coming at all. It took an outsider saying, hey, these ideas that I have learned in a completely different space, if I apply them to your industry, I can change anything. And I can change everything, rather. And that's a theme that we'll see throughout this. So seen in this lens, many, if not most of today's largest and most popular companies are actually intermediaries in one form or another. They're connecting buyers and sellers. They're acting as a platform for different types of people to come together and access content, access services in different ways. So the story of the digital revolution, contrary to what people thought, and contrary to actually what Bill Gates at one time thought, it's not the story of destroying middlemen. Some traditional middlemen have been destroyed, such as the classic example would be travel agent, right? Very few people use travel agents anymore, but the need that those travel agents represented is now being filled by other organizations such as Expedia up here or Priceline. So this idea of re-intermediation, new methods of inserting middlemen into industries where they can add value and where frankly they need to add value. Another great book called The Middleman Economy by Marina Krakowski has a categorization of middlemen into 6 different categories depending on what they do. Some are kind of just simple bridges, so they're connecting different people. Think maybe of Craigslist like that. Others might be risk bearers, so they are assuming risk for one side of the transaction and enabling transactions that way. You could think of Amazon in that way. If you have a issue with one of the sellers, they have a arbitration process. They'll help you out in that way. Some are concierges, so in a area where there's almost too much information overload, you need an expert to cut through and tell you to hold your hand and show you what you need. That's the idea of a concierge. So really, really interesting different ways that intermediaries are continuing to change industries and in many cases becoming the largest companies in those industries. So I think the big takeaway here is to think about putting yourself in that convention hall in the mid-90s of newspapers and think, what industries are the equivalent of those newspapers right now, right? Where are there industries where there are opportunities for someone to come in, or maybe there are far-seeing incumbents in that industry, such as classified ventures, to provide and monetize different types of intermediary services for your customers. This is a real big area of disruption, and one that's really important, not only for entrepreneurs to think about, but executives as well, to think about how they can defend their companies from attack from the outside. So the second one I want to talk about is monetization. And the story to open this is from the co-founder of Priceline.com, the founding CTO, a man named Scott Case. Once he had moved on from Priceline.com, which is where he developed this name your own price tool that some of you might be familiar with. So it's basically a way for customers to say how much they want to pay for a hotel. Hotels on the back end, while protecting their brands, could say how much they're willing to accept. And then the algorithm, the platform, would match those people together. A really great innovation that's since really exploded in different use cases. When he was done with that, though, he was interested in helping small businesses in his hometown of Washington, D.C. And there was a cafe that he was helping out with just some competitive price analysis, really just walking around to the local cafes and seeing what other people were charging for coffee around this cafe. And he figured out that his client, the cafe in question, was about 50 to 60 cents underpriced for a cup of coffee. And if they simply brought their price up to the average of their surroundings, they would add $25,000 to their bottom line. So we're talking about a small cafe, like 2 owners. So that's real money in people's pockets if they just were confident enough to bring price up to the average. The cafe owners were unsure, though. They hemmed and hawed. It felt aggressive. In the end, they raised the price of their cup of coffee by 25 cents rather than the recommended 60 cents. And the outcome was exactly what Scott Case predicted. They saw next to no loss in volume, and that extra margin there went right into their bottom line. In fact, they actually had some customers come in and thank them for raising their prices. They were afraid that because their prices were so low, they might go out of business because they knew that everyone else was charging more for that cup of coffee. The idea behind this is static prices that don't change. That not only doesn't work in the realm of hotels and airlines, that doesn't work for any business these days. Static prices truly are dead. In the cafe example, if you're not updating your prices regularly, if you're not inputting information like this competitive price analysis or other sources of information into your decision making, you're going to be dead in the water next to someone like Starbucks, who's constantly updating their prices, let alone someone like Amazon, who's changing prices hundreds of times for a certain SKU over the course of the day. In terms of pricing, the world is really our oyster right now in some ways. There are so many different pricing models that used to be applied only to certain industries that are now seeing application to many different types of companies and industries. Variable pricing is really just the idea of market segmentation, customer segmentation, charging different groups of people different amounts based on their willingness to pay. Probably the most simple and straightforward example here would be a senior discount, right? The willingness to pay, or the willingness to pay of seniors is relatively lower than the average population. So many businesses, or movie theater, for example, gives them a discount in order to entice them. Variable pricing is really a way of segmenting your customers based on different willingnesses to pay and charging them accordingly for that willingness to pay. Dynamic pricing is related, but instead of different groups of people, more properly, we're talking about a time dimension here. So an example that most people are probably familiar with is something like Lyft or Uber ride-hailing services, where the price for a given ride from point A to point B will change over time, depending how much supply of drivers there is and how much demand from other passengers, from other potential riders there is. Subscription pricing is really the idea of things that used to be sold on a simple basis, you buy it and you get it, are now being turned into subscriptions. One of the most impactful examples here is Dollar Shave Club, which literally didn't do anything except change the method by which razors were sold. Those aren't even their own razors. You could buy the razors that they're selling on Amazon if you wanted to. The only thing that they changed was the fact that razors now came in the mail on a regular basis. So I think that's a really fascinating example, and one of many where the pricing model is really the differentiator, not the product itself. There are a lot of opportunities here that are still untapped. Metered pricing is similar in that the transaction is no longer one-off and you're done. SaaS pricing can be a good example here, subscription as a service, where instead of charging for an install of software, you can now meter the usage of that software and charge accordingly. Maybe it's per user, maybe it's per user seat, maybe it's per megabyte used, maybe it's per form accessed. There are so many different types of metrics that can be used for this type of metered pricing. There's a lot of creativity around here, around this area for what is the method by which customers value your service and how can you accordingly charge in proportion to that method. Now, with all of this comes an important caveat that we need to be strategic in using these newfound powers. There was an example of Coca-Cola experimenting with a dynamically priced vending machine in, I think, the late 90s, where the cost of the Coke would go up as the temperature outside increased. Their argument was, their thought process was, people will value a cold beverage more the more hot it is outside, which is probably true. But the optics on it, the pricing psychology was completely off. People rebelled, they hated it, it felt like price gouging. The testing around these systems was very quickly shut off. And it was actually used as an opportunity by Pepsi to differentiate themselves and say, you know, we're not playing games with pricing. All of our innovation is around the actual taste and quality of our beverages, not tricks not gimmicks to trick you to pay more. So if you remember those bubbles that I showed in the beginning around pricing in the middle, one of those very important bubbles is psychology. Pricing touches so much on notions of fairness and equality. Those notions change. The idea that, you know, Raphael and I would pay different amounts for a plane seat, for a long time, that seemed insane. And now the opposite seems insane, right? We expect certain things to be priced differently. That can change over time. Lyft and Uber is another great example where it took a lot of coaching, a lot of customer education and communication for people to understand how the pricing model worked. In the Coke case, they failed, right? There have been a lot of examples of companies that have tried something too outlandish and they've fallen on their face. So it's very important to think from the perspective of your customers, figure out how can you make a pricing model that not only helps yourself as the company, but also is acceptable and reduces the buying friction between you and the customer. And that's really what the key question here is about. How can you design a pricing structure that's not just what we've always done before, but how do we align it with the larger strategy and make it easier for customers to interact with you rather than harder? I will do a quick pause there to see if there are any questions so far. Otherwise, we can move into transparency. Scanning, I don't think I see any hands up, so I'm going to keep going. Cool. All right, transparency. This is an issue that I had heard a lot about. I think we all, frankly, hear a lot about in the news, and there's kind of sense that transparency is good, lack of transparency is bad. That must go for pricing as well. But one of the things I wanted to really nail down is what exactly is it that we're talking about in the first place. So I've separated these concepts into price transparency versus pricing transparency. And really the difference is here, price transparency is knowing what the final price will be. Whereas pricing transparency is knowing how the final price will be decided. They might seem like the same thing at first, but they're really quite different. And I'm going to use an Uber example to illustrate that. Because Uber's concept of transparency has changed. Originally, back in the day, what Uber would show the customer is something like what we see on the screen right now, right? There would be some kind of multiplier, some type of notification in time of surge pricing that there is a multiplier effect going on. The normal rate here would be 7 times, the current rate would be 7 times the normal rate. You kind of know what the normal rate is, but you don't really know what the charge is going to be until you get to your destination, right? Very much like a traditional taxi cab in this way, there is a pricing metric, but the end bill isn't known until you're actually at your destination. So this is an idea of pricing transparency. They're showing you how they're going to price, but they're not telling you what the final price is. Nowadays, and actually as of 2016 in the US at least, it's all about price transparency. So they're no longer showing you multipliers. They're no longer showing you minimum fare, certain amount per minute, certain amount per mile multiplier. They're giving you a number, and that's that. So long as there's no major change to your route or something like that, down to the cent, you're going to pay what they show you when you request the Uber. So this is what I'm calling price transparency. You no longer see how the sausage is made really, but you know exactly at the beginning of the interaction what you're going to pay at the end. I wouldn't be a good consultant if I didn't have a 2x2 matrix. So we can think about it in this way. It's possible for companies to have one without the other, both, neither. Starting in the upper left, we have Uber originally, or something like Amazon Web Services, where this covers a lot of metered pricing examples where they're telling you how they will be charging you, but maybe by nature of the transaction or something else, you don't know what your final bill is going to be until you get to the end of the transaction, the end of the period, and then you find out what that bill is based on your usage or your mileage or something like that. So that's the upper left. Lower right is what Uber became, right? So the no longer transparent in terms of what the pricing is, but the price itself is very transparent now. You can think about Amazon Marketplace, where if you go and you're buying a product as a consumer, you see what that end price is going to be. You don't know how they arrived at that price, but you click it, you buy it, you know, they're gonna add tax, maybe some shipping, but it's very clear what that end amount is going to be. In the upper right, you have some rather specialized companies. Buffer is a software company. Oliver Cable and Everlane are clothing companies that are really priding themselves on their transparency. So not only are they transparent in terms of showing you what the final price is, but they kind of open up the hood of their organization and say, this is how we arrived at our price. So Everlane will tell you what the cost of the different inputs are of their clothing and how that adds up to a final cost, what their margin is, and then the final price. It's pretty rare, but there are some companies doing it and differentiating themselves that way. On the lower left, you have companies and industries that have neither price transparency nor pricing transparency. So U.S. healthcare is infamous in this way. If you go into a hospital, you have no way of knowing what you're going to owe when you come out. Frankly, the doctors don't either. No one does. So not only do you not know what the final price will be, you can't even really find out how it's going to be calculated. Maybe if you try really, really hard, but you don't really want to try that hard. On auto repair, that's also the case. Let's say your car is making a funny noise, you need to drop it off at the mechanic. They don't know what's wrong with it yet. They don't know what their costs are going to be associated. You don't know how they calculate that, and you don't know what the final bill is going to be until they're done. So that's not necessarily nefarious, right? It's just a lack of information there, but that's an area in which you have very little next to no pricing transparency or price transparency. One of the things I also wanted to push back against accordingly, or consequently, is that more transparency is always better and less transparency is always worse for the consumer. So this idea that not only as the consumer do I always want more transparency, and as the business do I always want less. And the answer, and perhaps as the economist and the consulting side of me, is it depends, right? This is the example of Southwest. A lot of people love this airline. And for them, transparency is a big part of their branding, a big part of their mission, right? They have this whole idea of transparency. They have low fares, nothing to hide, hashtag fees don't fly. So they're showing how they don't charge for checked bags, they don't change for a flight change fee, they don't change other select fees, and how all these other organizations do. They're also comparing themselves on the right to Spirit Airlines and how it all adds up. Notice that they're not actually claiming that they're the lowest price. They're just claiming that they have fewer fees, which is interesting little sleight of hands there. But they're making the argument that really the simplicity and the transparency of their offering is worth money, right? It shouldn't matter that they're not absolutely the lowest priced. They should earn a premium because of that transparency. And maybe they should. A lot of customers really love Southwest, use them all the time, but it's not right for every passenger. If we look back on the left here, the fact that they don't charge for checked bags, well, who's really to say, is that fair or not? Right? We have my wife and I have a young daughter. We need to check a lot of bags when we travel now. We're a more expensive traveler because of that. And maybe consequently, we should pay more, right? Maybe it's not fair for someone else to offset our cost by averaging out all the costs, saying there's no fee for bags. Maybe people who check bags should actually pay more. So it's really a matter of perspective and opinion. Which one of those scenarios is more fair? I don't think there's a claim that you can make that one is necessarily more ethical or better for the customer. There are different groups of customers that may value the convenience of no fees. There are other customers that may value the convenience of being able to choose their travel habits so that they can save money in different ways. It really comes down to the company in what I talked about before in terms of how is our pricing strategy, how is our pricing model rowing in the same direction of the branding messages that we want to make. So I want to get rid of this idea that transparency is always great for customers or always bad for businesses. It's more of a point of differentiation, right? So how is your company differentiated from the competition based on transparency? Not only currently, how should it be, right? Again, this idea of how can we use our pricing strategy to further communicate the brand message that we want to make. I'm seeing a question right now from Rich Mullen. Before I jump into channel, let's get that one. I'm going to unmute you, Rich, see if this works.
Hi, Kyle, how are you? Can you hear me all right?
Sorry, I'm getting some feedback. One sec.
Any better?
All right, good now.
Yeah.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Okay. Yeah. So in your travels, I wanted to ask if you find pricing transparency to be more prevalent in a B2B market versus a B2C market, you know, pulling aside maybe some outliers that have to do with, you know, information asymmetries and just other things like that. Do you find that? Is there some delineation between those two markets as far as pricing transparency?
Yeah, I think there's a rough correlation there where B2B markets, business-to-business markets tend to have more pricing transparency because there typically tends to be a more sophisticated procurement team on the other side, right? Really analyzing the contract and trying to figure out through maybe a RFP process or another method what exactly they are contracting for and what it's going to cost them. Yeah, so I'd say in general that is the case, that there tends to be more pricing transparency in B2B.
So how you
with a lot of exceptions on both ends.
And so how you strategize what your value is in a B2B situation, in other words, where you really get your cake, becomes more paramount in that kind of a more complicated pitch process.
Yeah, I think how I would put it is for B2B companies in particular, it's really important to think about how can I make this transaction easiest for my customer to make? How do I make it easiest for the customer to buy from me? You kind of mentioned it implicitly in your question that, especially in B2B markets, the pricing can be extremely complicated. And there can be real value in cutting through that, even on the enterprise side, on the B2B side, and offering something that's simple and easy to understand and again, easy to buy, rather than seeing how much you can gum up the sales process by a complicated pricing model.
Yeah, the way we used to say it is you have to know whether your customer's buying a price or not.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
I say
and
that in a general term.
Mm-hmm. In a funny way, a lot of what we do in pricing strategy is try to find ways for people to pay less attention to price. If you are differentiating yourself on price, there can only be one winner in an industry, right? Let's say it's Walmart. It's hard to beat Walmart on price. If you want to compete in that realm, you should probably figure out something that isn't price to differentiate yourself on. And that could have aspects of pricing, the method by which people buy from you, but training your customers to care only about your price is a losing proposition. Great question. All right, up into channel. So here we're talking about sales channels, distribution channels, how your product or services get to your end customers. And what I hear a lot from manufacturers or distributors that we work with is that they kind of are forced to use the channel relationships that they have. This is just the way that it works in our industry. We always sell through a wholesaler who sells to a retailer who sells to the end user. They all take their slice of the pie as it goes, and we're left with no margins. But there are some really great examples of companies eschewing that conventional wisdom and pursuing radically different channel strategies in their industries. Most people probably recognize this man, Elon Musk, the CEO of Tesla, and may be familiar with his attempts to sell cars directly in the US, which I won't get into the details, but the US typically and traditionally has had a mandated middleman intermediary in the form of car dealerships that have to stand between the OEM, the manufacturer, and the end user. And that's something that Tesla was really fighting against. That really came to a head in 2014 in New Jersey, where he wanted to sell direct, and the automobile dealership association there really fought back hard. They said he was way out of his league. He didn't know what he was doing. What he was doing was illegal, and that Tesla was going to go out of business. Now, it looked for a time that the courts were going to go in the direction of the dealership association, but it probably comes as no big surprise where we are in 2020 that Tesla is not out of business. In fact, they're doing quite well, questions of delivery aside. But the Model 3 actually became one of the top 5 selling cars in the US in 2018. In terms of sales growth, it's one of the few companies seeing just massive, massive growth. And a lot of that appeal comes from a completely different channel relationship that you have with the customer, right? In Elon Musk's concept, they're almost more of like an Apple or an iPhone. You can't buy a Tesla from a normal salesperson because they're not going to know what they're talking about. The value proposition of one of these electric cars is so different that they need to be able to control their sales channel and make sure that they have the right messaging, the right training for their sales, rather than work through this distributed method of car dealerships. And it's been working out really well for them. Another lighter example, see if this actually plays. I both hope and hope you can't hear that. You can. This is the CEO of Oatly, an oat milk company, basically just singing these words over and over, not particularly well. Well, there was a key change there at the end, which as a musician, I like. But Oatly is like I said, a type of oat-based milk product that has had a completely different marketing approach than most CPG, most consumer packaged goods companies, that basically need to kowtow to grocery stores, pay a lot of money to get shelf space, and frankly cross their fingers that they're going to get noticed by customers and bought off the shelf. Instead, Oatly has spent a lot of money on weird 15-second YouTube videos from their CEO, these enormous murals. I think this is in New York City. A really kind of weird, quirky corporate personality to get people's attention and to build word of mouth. They also built up word of mouth by a sense of exclusivity. They originally were only available through high-end coffee shops. So they would sell to those coffee shops, baristas would use the product, customers would ask what that is, learn about Oatly, say, oh, where can I get it? Well, you can't. For a while, they simply couldn't. And then they started selling only through these high-end coffee shops until they had essentially leveraged up enough popularity, enough negotiation power to then approach grocery stores and say, okay, we're already a big deal. What can you do for us? Basically, what they did is they focused first on delighting customers, on connecting with those customers rather than hoping their channel partners would do that for them. And consequently, one nice thing for them too is there's next to nothing spent on traditional CPG direct marketing, which is usually something that this type of product needs to spend a lot of money on. They, Oatly and other companies like it have been doing extremely well lately too, because people are looking for more shelf-stable milk substitutes as everyone's stocking up their basements. So Oatly's continuing to be on a tear, and they're now available, in your Safeways and your common grocery stores. So anyone can get it now that everyone knows what it is. So the kind of through line with electric cars and oat milk is really taking a step back and thinking about how, if you could, would you redesign from scratch your company's channel structure? How could we sidestep these distributors that everyone says we need to use? If they're adding value, fantastic. If they're helping you get to your customers, terrific. That's exactly what we want from an intermediary. But if they're not delivering on that value, you should use that money somewhere else. You should try to get to your customers a different way. If they're simply standing between you and your customers are no longer your customers. They're your distributor's customers. And that's a big issue. Finally, data. It would be remiss not to talk about data in terms of digital disruption and technological revolutions. The broad strokes here are probably known by most people in this type of audience already. Needless to say, your information has been compromised. Data is not only a big asset for companies, but a big liability as well. Right? One of the largest ones in recent memory being Cambridge Analytica and Facebook, which happened, geez, that was only a year ago. It feels so long ago. But billions of records were compromised. Big scandal, big hit for Facebook. In terms of where that stacks up with some other breaches of note, it hardly even registers. So the issue here is really for companies to think about not only how their data can be used to deliver value, but how can they protect themselves from the risks associated with using and manipulating customers' data. One of the interesting counterexamples to kind of business as usual in this world is one that we're all probably familiar with, Netflix, where it generates a tremendous amount of data from users' viewing habits, but it's simply not for sale. It's not something that other companies have access to. It doesn't want to share that data. It doesn't sell any advertisements. It doesn't release ratings. In some ways, like the quote says, Netflix is an old-fashioned entertainment studio. It pays up for quality fare, charges a healthy price for the consumers to consume it, and uses the data that's generated to feed back into its own processes, to feed back into its own content development, in order to make its own product better and better. It's not in the business of collecting data and selling that data to someone else and all of the bad consequences and loss of customer trust that can happen as a consequence. It's truly using that data in the service of increasing its own value for its customers. So that's really the question that I want to leave us with for data is not only, I feel like a lot of companies and executives and entrepreneurs as well are thinking about how can I develop a stream of data that I can then sell to someone else, right? What I would encourage people to think about is how can I generate data that I can actually use to improve my own product, right? I think there's a lot of value there for focusing again on what it is our customers find valuable about our core products and how do we improve those rather than how do we harvest data from products and sell that data to someone else and make a business model out of that. Great, so those are the 5 forces or revolutions that I get into in much deeper detail in the book. As you've probably sussed out as I've talking about them, there's a substantial amount of overlap between them in the way that channel partners are a form of intermediary that have effects over how you can monetize your products, what data you can develop. They have consequences too in terms of your transparency. So kind of what are the through lines here, right? What are the common core concepts that connect these 5 different forces? And it really comes down to 2 pretty simple ones that I think are only more important in our current COVID-19 era with squeezed budgets and squeezed spending power as well. The first and one of the core insights of value-based pricing and pricing strategy is really to focus on your customers. Understand who your customers are, understand what they value, understand their willingness to pay, and understand how you can serve their needs. A business without customers isn't a business. You need to be able to serve customers' needs profitably in order to create better and better products and services and to turn a profit, to continue to exist as an organization. So in this concept, customers are really a form of royalty, right? It's not to say that customers always know what's best, but you always do need to think from your customer's perspective. Figure out what they value, figure out how what you are offering is better or worse than what the competition is offering to solve those similar needs, and figure out how you can get to your customers better than everyone else. I alluded to this in my last answer, but part and parcel with this is focus on profits. I think especially now, entrepreneurs who are hoping to start a company without a concept of profitability, without a path to profitability, and count on open pockets of investors to see them through 5, 10, 15, 20 years of lack of profitability, they're going to be in for a bad time. When you understand your customers, when you understand what they value, that's when you can really start to engineer your products and services with profitability in mind from the beginning. You're no longer coming up with a shiny gadget and then trying to figure out if people want it and see if they'll pay you more than what it costs for you to make it. Instead, you're figuring out what your customers want, figuring out how you can develop products that fit those needs in a profitable manner, and you're baking profitability into your company. So again, I almost can't say it enough. If a customer doesn't perceive and acknowledge the value of what you're offering, that value simply doesn't exist. Here we've upgraded customers not only from royalty but to emperor, but the overall point stands that in order to have a strong, profitable company, you have to have close relationships with your customers and understand what they need. Almost to the end, that could feel like a lot of information, so I want to leave us with a couple quick quotes that I found really useful throughout my career. The first is from this gentleman here, Jim Schlesinger, who was the first Secretary of Energy in the U.S., also served as CIA director and defense secretary too, I believe. And this is kind of a cautionary tale. He's talking here about the state of the U.S. Energy infrastructure, but it's unfortunately a quote that has come to mind again and again as worked with different companies. And that's this idea that we only have two modes, complacency and panic. I think, unfortunately, again, with COVID-19, we're seeing that on a global scale. We were unprepared for something like this. We were complacent, and now people are panicking. So what we need to do as entrepreneurs and executives is to figure out that middle ground there, figure out how we can act in times that the competition is complacent, or keep our own organizations out of complacency and avoid that panic that happens. Thinking back to the Bill Gates and newspaper example, how can we be the people in that conference hall who realized that he was right, saw the writing on the wall, and were able to steer their organizations through a extremely rough time and create really profitable companies out of that. So that's one of the challenges I have for people on this call. The other one is a quote you may have seen before. Again, I wouldn't be much of a consultant if I didn't if I didn't refer back to Peter Drucker as well. But this quote has been ascribed to various people. I'm choosing the Druck on this one. But the best way to predict the future is to create it. Again, one of my goals with this book and talking through it with you all is to avoid trying to predict, which individual technologies, which individual companies are going to control the future. More about how can we identify themes and commonalities that we can see across industries, across different companies, and how can we see the disruption that's occurring as not only an opportunity, but an opportunity to create new and better services, even better ways to connect with customers in even more profitable manners. So with that, that is the end of what I have prepared. I wanted to make sure we have plenty of time for Q&A, so I'd love to address those. Before we end, just please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Our websites are here too. If you are interested in the type of things I'm talking about, at wigloffjournal.com here, we just finished a revamp of our website there. We publish monthly on all sorts of topics relating to sales, marketing, entrepreneurship, pricing. So a lot of great content there. If you are too shy to ask a question or think of something later, please reach out to me via email, reach out to me via LinkedIn. I use both excessively and always happy to help. With that, let's open it up for any other questions.
I know nobody's asking any questions, but I just wanted
Raphael,
to
looks like you
say thank you so much.
Oh. Yes. So, I mean, we obviously know that getting your price right is a good thing, but competing in price is not always a great idea. So when you talk to your customers, how do you steer them away from the temptation of going head to head price-wise? Again, the competition, and perhaps direct the attention to different aspects of your value proposition.
Mm-hmm. It can be tricky. A lot of times it involves quite a lot of internal work within the organization, what we would call part of a pricing transformation. So really getting, at the least, sales, marketing, and finance more aligned, and communicating better on what pricing is and what it should be. Sometimes that means, in some cases, marketing has basically been like a pamphlet designer beforehand, and we really need them to step up and say, this is what we understand about our customers. This is what our products deliver. And this is the type of value communication we need around that to demonstrate what our products and services do for the customer, so that they can see the value associated with that, see that the value is up here, and we're only asking for something down here. And if you're creating more value for your customer than you're asking for in price, then they start to be able to make their own sales for you in the best of circumstances. But you're absolutely right that a lot of there can be a lot of hesitancy around competing on things that aren't priced, because it's hard. It's really easy to just drop your price to what the competition is doing and say, okay, well, yeah, we'll match their price. It's a lot harder to say, no, we charge more because we're worth more. And these are the ways that we know we're worth more. And this is how we know the value that these different ways deliver value for you or for your customers in a B2B situation. That takes a lot more work. So it is work, but it's something that the most profitable and the most successful companies have nailed. The only other thing I would say there too is something we like to say, that pricing is a verb, not a noun. So it's really a process of continuous improvement. There isn't a single price that's going to be the best price always forever for all customers for this product. It's much more around how do we develop the people and the processes and the tools within organizations to make continuous improvements around their pricing, to collect the right kind of inputs to feed back into their pricing, and to keep on that ball of constant improvement of their pricing and their pricing structures.
Thank you.
Great. I think question from Brian too.
All right. Well, thank you so much. This is really great. So either through your travels in your career or through the research in your book, I'm curious about the platform model in terms of maybe new emerging trends that are coming about, things that are maybe breaking down and what used to work well previously, or things that are working really well where people are kind of deviating, doing something different to kind of really optimize the platform.
Great. Yeah, that's something that I not to punt, but get into a lot more in the book with those 6 different categories of intermediaries that I talked about. One of the great examples is, and I referenced it already, is Craigslist, right? That in terms of a platform, you can get quite a lot of what you want to get on Craigslist, right? You can buy almost any type of product that you could imagine, or any type of service on Craigslist. And yet most of commerce does not happen on Craigslist. Why is that? It's because people want more from platforms than just a simple bridge, a simple connection between buyer and seller. They want assurances that the person that they're working with isn't a serial killer. They want the convenience of the company doing the platform, perhaps doing the warehousing and the shipping for them. Perhaps they need their handheld, and say you're looking to buy a new car. You could do that on Craigslist, or buy a used car, a better example on Craigslist. You could do that, but maybe you want to go to a site like AutoTrader or Cars.com because they have research guides, they have tools for you to walk through that step by step will take what your interests or what your needs are and kind of show in a decision tree where that might lead you. So that is something that's certainly not necessarily new, but I think that's a really important way to think about different types of intermediaries that are in the same industry, is kind of what level and what types of services they're offering. One thing that I would say is a larger trend is it is hard for platforms to serve both sides of their market well. Platforms can also be called multi-sided markets because they're dealing with customers on both sides, right? To use the Cars.com example, not only are they serving people who are looking to buy a car, but they're also serving the dealers and the manufacturers who want to advertise and advertise their their stock on the platform. So you need to keep both of those groups of people happy. You need to make sure that you're delivering value to both groups of those people and understand how you're delivering that value in order to strike that balance. If Cars.com was really opaque in terms of price and didn't give you many comparison tools, maybe that would be really good for the dealerships, but not very good for the customer experience. On the other hand, if they kind of threw the dealerships under the bus and didn't give dealerships the opportunity to have their own branding on the site, perhaps that would be too far in the direction of favoring the customer over the dealership. So the right balance between those different groups is going to be different for different companies, but really critically, as an intermediary, you do need to figure out how you can serve both sides of the market, and how by creating value for both sides, you encourage both sides to come to the table and increase the value of your platform that way.
Great, thanks.
Thank you. Dan?
Yeah, thanks, Kyle. So my question's more related to the industry I'm specifically in, and where channel is the 800-pound gorilla, and you're left trying to drive growth from the end user or the customer, as you mentioned, proving that value to your customer base. If you were meeting with an executive in an industry like that, how do you coach them on if they're trying to conserve selling expense? So if they want to keep bottom line and try to drive that value and customer base, but at the same time maintain expense while growing, is there a pitch you have or a pricing strategy that you can kind of help leverage that to help, that you can't squeeze from both ends and still grow a business?
So sorry, I had a little Wi-Fi hiccup. I heard the end
That's
of
okay.
it, beginning of what industry you're in.
So I'm in the network and telecommunications industry. So we deal through about 4 to 5, $10 billion distributors, channel kind of partners. And so they're the 800-pound gorilla. So they're the king. And a lot of times they only care that is whatever they're getting best margin or whatever they have on the shelf. They don't usually push product per se. So the industry kind of converted to that. So when you're left having to drive that sales and really just have an intermediary, there's always small opportunities, like you said, for going direct or trying new things and things like that. But more and more, you've got to be more creative. And this day and age, a lot of executives and shareholders, what they want to do is they want to see top line growth, but at the same time, operating income improvement. So a lot of times they want you to, while you're growing, also improve your selling expense as a percent of net sales, right? So, so they decrease sales headcount, increase top line sales, and somehow maintain margin, even though the distribution channel is not doing anything for you. So it's like it's between a rock and a hard place. And I'm wondering if you were in that meeting with the executives, is there a pricing strategy that helps you maintain that?
Yeah. So the 800-pound gorillas makes me think about the couple of examples here and more that I have in the book around the channel strategies. And if you are working with distributors that aren't adding value, how do you try to improve those relationships, or how do you try to go around them? We work quite a lot in agriculture industries too, and there are different companies. Their method is to go to the end users, the growers, and develop their brand on that side to make customers care more about the brands that they get from the distributor rather than the distributor itself. It's certainly not easy, but that's something that a lot of companies face with Amazon too, right? Most customers' default decision or first step rather in buying many types of products is just to go to Amazon and see what they see there. For companies like eyewear, Warby Parker, that I believe still aren't available on Amazon, they're really making the push that they're special, that they can create a special brand relationship with the end user and keep control of their channel that way. In their minds, they don't want to be on Amazon. They don't want to, be in a strict comparison with what else is out there, because they don't think they can be compared directly to what else is out there. Needless to say, that does take a lot of legwork in terms of branding, customer relationships, and also the value-based product development that I was talking about in order for that to work. But those are the first things that come to my mind. With that said, pricing can also involve a series of trade-offs. It's not necessarily the case that you're always going to get improvements along all those lines that you mentioned at the same time across the board for every customer. That sounds just on its face unrealistic. But if the company knows where its strategy lies and where it wants to pursue, then that helps to answer some of those pricing questions as well, rather than trying to be everything for everyone. Thanks. Let's see. Is it Alan? Kenlick?
Do you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
All right, cool. So one of the things that I tend to run into a lot with my clients is, you're dealing with mid-level management, people who have gotten their budget approved either months in advance, or they're dealing with block grants where they don't really have much flexibility to work with getting more money into to do a project, right? It just meaning that they need to get a project done. They have a set budget for it, and whatever they're asking for is just going to exceed it in cost. And there's really not much you can do to kind of work around that outside of just kind of putting a strain or asking them to basically find money that doesn't exist for them, just given the context that they're engaging with you on a project. Obviously this happens a lot where people are trying to, or companies are trying to figure out like, hey, I need to get this project done, and I'm looking to spend this kind of money. But it's I've always found that kind of challenging, because it means that like you can't just go out and give them what the thing they're asking for at their price, and so it becomes a totally like value driven conversation. I'm wondering what kind of advice you have around that, and how do you approach people when they say we don't have the budget for this project?
You're talking from the perspective of a pricing consultant. Is that what you're doing?
I'm talking about as a seller.
As a seller, okay. So any product.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, one of the most straightforward approaches is a concept of kind of a give and a get. This works best if you have products that have some kind of tiered system, a good, better, best, and you essentially are able to outline what the value and the price is for those products along a continuum of increasing price and increasing value. If customers are unable or unwilling to pay for the higher value, then you have a few different options. You can show them how there's a lower price but also lower value offering that maybe fits their budget. By showing the trade-off in that way, then they get an implicit sense of what they're giving up as well. And they're seeing the connection between price and value, in that if they're able to pay more, then they get more out of it as well. That can be a really great approach for helping customers to self-segment themselves into different categories, whether it's gold, silver, platinum, something like that, or good, better, best type scenario. Another thing to remember, though, is not every customer is a customer that you want to serve. Perhaps you don't have a product that fits their need, their budget, and that's okay. For a long time, at least, Apple didn't have budget models. The prices for their phones were the prices that they were. They did next to no discounting. They were very confident in their claim that their products deliver a ton of value. They ask for relatively small price compared to the immense value that they're offering. If you can't afford it, then the best of luck to you. But we're looking for other customers. So in that case, it can be an issue with some sales teams, the idea of walking away from sales, saying no to any revenue. But from a margin and a pricing perspective, it's really important in terms of your price cohesion and your price perception in a market to not to discount heavily in order to meet the budget concerns of certain customers. On a strategic basis, there can always be situations in which case a key account or something like that maybe gets a special deal. But if you're in a situation where the same product is being sold to some people for $100 and some people for $10, you are creating more problems for you than you're getting from that $10 sale. Cool. Ahmed?
Hey, how's it? Hey, can you hear me? Okay. Okay, cool. My question is around loyalty programs. When crafting those, what has been your experience around the pricing strategies involved with creating those loyalty programs? I think I broke the internet.
Sorry, I'm back.
Okay, cool. No worries. So I think you didn't catch any of that, right?
I didn't, unfortunately, no.
No worries. My question revolves around loyalty programs and pricing strategies and the process that goes into that from your experience. How's been the process or experience for you in that regard?
For developing loyalty programs or what specifically?
Yes, so for like the development of them. So for example, you're like the famous ones like airlines with price you have you taking points and that's converting to some type of nominal price. Like what are the strategies that go into that from your experience?
Yeah, that's that can be a pretty big topic. I think I have my shared screen up again, but at the WeLeftJournal.com, if you search for commercial strategy, that's something that you'll see good enough. It's there, talking about how to make discounts and rebates work for your company rather than just be giving money away. And loyalty programs are kind of a way of doing that in concept. You're giving preferential treatment to certain customers under certain conditions, namely that they're loyal to you, right? That they keep buying from you. So it can be a pretty deep topic, but generally the goal is to make sure you're encouraging the behaviors that that you want to see, right? If you have customers that can buy from you in more profitable ways, then with that extra money that you're making, you can afford to give some of that back in the form of a discount or a rebate. What you don't want out of discounts and rebates and loyalty programs is it just to be margin leakage in a way that customers are getting more value out of you in exchange for nothing. So on the airline side, it's a method to try to differentiate what objectively is a pretty commoditized thing, how you get from point A to point B in a flying tin can. There's really not that much difference between the experience that you get on one airline versus the other. So their method of trying to make it less about price is to introduce this concept of loyalty where you get different perks at different levels. It encourages you, all else equal and within a margin, to prefer one airline over another. If there's a factor of 2 difference in price, maybe you don't go with your preferred airline, but a lot of business travelers at least still do. So it's a great way for them to reduce customers' price sensitivity. The more general point around discounts and rebates that again I want to make is a lot of, well, always when we are designing programs, it comes down to what are the behaviors that we want to encourage out of customers. So do we want customers to buy more from us? Then some type of volume-based rebate or discount would be what we want to create. Do we want to reward certain sized customers or customers that we have certain relationships with over others? Then that speaks to some type of loyalty program or some type of classification of customers into maybe gold, silver, bronze, something like that. And they get some type of automatic benefit based on which program that they're in. Is shipping expensive for us? Then we want to encourage customers to buy in bulk, right? Maybe they get a certain percentage off if they buy above a certain tonnage versus buying something in a lot of small packets. That's more expensive for us to ship. Is our cost of capital high and we really want money up front? Then let's give a discount for on-time payment or payment within 30 days, something like that. Versus let's say that the common payables is 90, something like that. If you want to encourage a shorter payment cycle, then figure out what it's worth to you and design a rebate that's sharing what that's worth to you back. Does that make sense? Does that kind of answer the question?
No, definitely. I appreciate it. And I'll definitely check out the article that you referenced as well too. Appreciate it.
Yeah, the general business industry term, I guess, for that is commercial policy, commercial strategy. You find a lot of information on it under that.
Thanks.
Thank you. That's my participants window. There we go. Brittany.
Hi, Kyle. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you.
My question actually centers around the current epidemic or pandemic that we're going through. So with the impact of COVID obviously impacting demand and industry declines, a lot of companies are responding with aggressive pricing and discount actions, which with the hope of COVID being shorter term, what are your thoughts around taking these pricing actions and ensuring that they don't have long-term impacts to the profitability and margins of your industry?
Yeah. The first step is to really figure out, is price your issue? A lot of beer manufacturers are the market through bars and restaurants has just collapsed, right? No one's going to those establishments, no one's ordering those drinks there. So when they think that heavily discounting that channel is going to do anything, they're wrong, right? There's no demand for that product. It's not getting to customers. Even if you're offering something to restaurants at 90% off, they're not going to buy it because customers aren't coming in. That seems pretty simple, but that's actually a situation that we run into quite a bit, is companies not realizing that they have derived demand, that customers, due to circumstances outside of their control, simply don't want their product anymore at any price. So that's a big one. Down the road, gas is really cheap, but I'm not driving anywhere. It could be 5 cents a gallon. I'm still not going to buy it. I simply don't need it. So part of it is understanding what kind of category of problem you're having right now. If you have a product that simply no one wants, then you got to figure out other products or shut down for now and hope that you can pop back up once conditions have improved. If you do have a product that people want, but their purchasing power is just greatly diminished, then it could be a situation in which significant discounting plays a role. Around that, though, communication becomes really important. It's important for customers to understand that this is a short-term discount. This is, I guess, I would go back to the concept of list prices, MSRPs, being kind of the value statements, the claim of value that companies make to the marketplace. It may not be the final price that many customers pay, or maybe any customers pay this list price, but it's becomes a comparison point between you and your competition, and again, a claim of the value that you create for the marketplace. Why I bring that up is, in terms of a short-term discount, I think it is important to still emphasize what that list price is and show how much you're discounting off of that list price, because that leaves you the ability and the kind of psychological presence for your brand to go back up to what that list price or closer to that list price once conditions improve. If you simply are only communicating your discounted price, people start to forget about this one, and their expectations are reset that actually you are only this valuable, and you will only be this valuable even as conditions improve. So it's certainly a tricky time. There are some situations in which pricing flexibility will help companies get through this. That does obviously come with costs, though, and it needs to be managed very carefully in terms of margin and branding and customer communication. And again, I would just make sure that everyone does a gut check that price is actually an issue for them right now, and it's not something more fundamental about the situation we find ourselves in.
Thank you.
Great. Rafael, you have another one?
So I have a question about algorithmic pricing. So is what you do being somewhat threatened by algorithmic pricing, or is it more of a complement to what you do?
It's much more of a complement to what we do. There are a lot of software companies that focus on pricing software. So software that helps companies like CRM, customer relationship management. Companies like Salesforce have pricing components. There's a whole area called CPQ, configure, price, quote. that for especially complicated products helps salespeople configure a product, kind of package that together for their customers and arrive at the right quote there. Pricing analysis, analytics, all sorts of stuff. There's software out there that does it. For us, being more on the management consulting side, we see that as very complementary and not something that we get into ourselves directly. In order for that software to be effective, and this is something that I actually just wrote about on the journal website, the difference between efficiency and effectiveness, right? Software makes you more efficient. It can improve decision-making, but if you're not getting the right inputs into it, you're not going to get the right outputs out of it either. So many times for a company that's doing a much larger transformation of all of its pricing ecosystem, we would be among the first people to come in to do the pricing transformation, the organizational design, the best practices, the training, the kind of creating that foundation for good pricing that then you could put software on top of and automate decisions that you're making going forward. Yeah, very, very complementary in that way. Some software companies do have their own consulting arms, but quite a few prefer to keep that separate in kind of the same reasons that, for some of the same reasons that we do, so that we can specialize in different things and help companies in different ways.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions?
Any other questions? Okay. So,
a question I actually typed it in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, did you?
Mm-hmm.
Who was that, Seema?
Yep.
Seema, okay. If you do make a bad decision in pricing, such as the Coke example you gave, how do you rectify the situation? Good question. It's going to depend a lot on the bad situation that you've made, whether it's something that you can quickly correct or not. For something like Coke, it was a limited test. It may have been in Brazil. I'm blanking on the details right now. But essentially, it was a test. It was a pilot. It wasn't something that they decided to implement overnight for their entire global operations. So it was something that they could relatively quickly walk back from. With that said, it's a global company. It's an enormous company. It has very dedicated competition. So any misstep that they make is amplified, becomes news, becomes a substantial misstep. So if you are testing out, or if you are considering big changes to your pricing model like that, it's great if you can find ways to test it out in certain markets or certain groups of customers to make sure that you understand what the trade-offs are in the model that you're giving, and you can get feedback into that model, make improvements before it's something that you launch completely. If you do make bad decisions in pricing and it's kind of all over the place, then it's really it's going to depend on the type of industry and the type of company of what you can do. But really, what your best case is to rectify the decision, revert back to what you were doing before, explain to your customers as best you can that you made a mistake, outline how you made that mistake or in what ways you're making it better, and try to go forward from there. It's going to depend a lot too of whether your mistake is in your favor, so greatly overcharging for something, or in the customer's favor, massively undercharging. It's a lot easier as a company to reduce price if you launch with something that's priced too high, to step back and reduce the price, much more than it is to introduce a product at a really low price, realize that you've left a ton of value on the table, and then try to increase the price from there. That's a lot harder proposition to make than a mistake in the opposite direction. Good question.
Thank you. So wouldn't
Victoria?
you?
Oh, sorry.
No, I was gonna say, so like going back to the I missed the name, the person who asked the question prior to me. because of COVID-19, there are like airlines that are slashing their prices. I mean, isn't that a horrible move on their part? I mean, they're basically resetting what the standards should be, and when things are over, like that's the price we're going to be stuck with. And the truth of the matter is, people don't want to travel, not because they don't want to travel. It's just because of this, because they don't want to get sick.
Yeah, I largely agree. I think it's more of the gasoline example that I gave than anything else. If I could get on a $10 flight tomorrow, I still wouldn't do it. Now that's me. There are people who feel differently. There is still some business travel going on. Those customers are less price sensitive in the first place. So giving them a massive discount is a huge mistake for a flight that they would have taken at a normal ticket price anyway. It seems like a big mistake to me. I think a lot of it is they're desperate for cash. Any cash coming is going to help them out at this point, since they have not planned for contingencies like this. Whether they should have or not is a separate question. I think they are leaving a lot of money on the table. I'm sure they are scratching their heads trying to figure out what to do. It doesn't seem logical to me. In terms of price expectations, once time is normal again, I think they are benefited in the fact that we don't have too many options, right? There are only a handful, let's call them a half dozen airlines. So we can be pretty certain that they're all going to move their prices up in more or less lockstep with each other. It's not going to be, I think, to your point, it's not going to be that the price expectations are permanently destroyed. They're, I think, kind of for separate reasons. I think that there is going to be a lot of pent up travel demands that's going to be unleashed suddenly. I'm sure they'll take their darndest to take advantage of that in terms of pricing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, we've gone a little bit over. I want to make sure everyone has the rest of it.
We have one more question by Victoria.
One more question? Okay, great. Victoria.
Hi, how are you? Thank you for your time. My question, I think, is a little bit more obvious and simple. I just wanted your advice and perspective on like startups, just to estimate the value of your product. I know you can estimate it through willingness to pay or observing other competition, but what will be the best advice based on your experience in all of your work?
Yeah. Do you have a particular startup or industry in mind?
Well, yeah, but I'm studying entrepreneurship. I do have something based on family business, but I also like thinking on something that I want to make by myself. I sometimes think about that.
Yeah, it can depend a little bit on the industry that you're trying to target, but for most of the groups that we work with, and this is especially good for B2B, although it's also applicable for B2C, there is a methodology called economic value to customer, EVC. It's not our tool, it's an industry standard, academically best practice, but we have a lot of information about that on our website and the journal as well. You can Google it too, and stuff will come up. But EVC, economic value to customer, is a methodology for quantitatively determining what the value of your product is versus the next best alternative. It helps to develop a mathematical model for how much value you're creating for a given customer, determine how much of that value you can capture in terms of price, and that leaves you with a good first estimation of what your price can be. It also leaves you with a model that you can update, speaking again of continuous improvement, as you refine your knowledge of what certain aspects may be worth to your customers, or different ways that they're adding value. You can change what those inputs are and see how it cascades through the model. That is typically a first cut, or sometimes a pretty deep cut that we do with customers of all size. Very differing levels of complexity, but at a simple level, even just thinking through this EVC can be a great way of testing your assumptions and seeing, you know, if my expectation of what I think this product should be worth is a factor of 2 or a factor of 10 different than this number that I'm coming up with through this EVC methodology, then something's going on that I don't understand. Either it's a mistake in the model or it's a mistake in how I'm thinking about my product. So that would be my recommendation, EVC.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think we are done. This was fantastic. Thank you so much, Kyle, for being our first virtual guest.
My pleasure. Thank you, everyone, for participating.
Yeah,
for having me.
We hope to have you in person in the future, and that will be a lot of fun. And everybody, don't forget about the new invisible hand. Okay, so that will make the talk complete for everybody. But thank you.
There is the hard copy ebook, and one of the goals of this quarantine is producing an audiobook version too. So
very good.
Your ear is open for that. Again, please feel free to reach out via email or LinkedIn if you have any other questions or concerns or just want to connect. I'm always available. So thank you. Really appreciate it.